Okay, good morning, everybody. Am I audible?
Hi, good morning. Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thanks, Nidhi. So good morning, everybody. And my name is Sunil Govind. I head the facility management and operations for the Bangalore International Exhibition Center. And me and my team, we are getting into exhibition planning management and operations management, exhibitions operations planning management, and how that's going to impact us as we move forward. I don't think we all agree that not planning is as good as failing. Okay, so if you're not, they say that failing to plan is planning to fail. And I think in exhibitions operations management, planning is such an important component. And it consists of so many factors. Your own internal people management planning, your own how your vendors engage with you, how the venue engages with you, how your exhibitors and how your visitors engage with you. Everything is part of the operations planning, and it's a big slate to cover. But what we have tried to do is we have tried to actually narrow it down to contingency planning, because I believe that's what is the flavor of the month for more reasons than one. So we would like to concentrate on that particular aspect. And obviously, to help me out in this endeavor, I have some very good panel of speakers with me. I have with me Mr. Debasish Majumder. He's the Senior Director, SIAM. I have Max Fernandes, Director Operations India, Informa Markets. I have Satyendra Mehra, Group Director, Nürnbergmesse India Private Limited. I have Vicky Bedi, CEO, PS Bedi Logistics, and Chairman, IELA. Without any more introductions, I would directly get into what I want to do. I would request Debasish. Debasish, I'm assuming you are here. Yeah, Debasish, can you unmute yourself, Debasish? Yeah. My request to Debasish is when obviously you have experience with Auto Expo, and when Auto Expo was, when we were undergoing Auto Expo, the COVID had just started off. I would want you to share some of your experience vis-a-vis that, and what was your on-ground challenges and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. See, what happened was we were at the very beginning. I think the first COVID case came to India. It's around 29th of January, and our exhibition started a week after that. So, but I must, congratulate and sincerely thanking our government for taking very, very proactive steps much before. Anybody could have guessed how big the challenges was, because we were informed by the health ministry to collect data of all the exhibitors who had come from other places, specifically from abroad, their whereabouts, where they're staying, if they have changed hotel, which hotel they are staying, and if they change hotel, then the hotels, the updated hotel list, and taking daily their medical parameters in a guided format. So we had to, we had planned for about 5 odd, medical facilities in the venue, but we had increased it to 8. And for the exhibitor, we had specially made 3 odd, medical centers, from where all the exhibitors used to come, especially the people who are from overseas, and used to clock their medical data once in the morning and once in the evening. And those data used to be passed every day to the district administration and in turn to the central government. And during the exhibition also, by that time, the COVID was actually catching up. So from the ministry, there was a request or advisory that all the people who are from abroad should be abstaining from staying in the exhibition area. So that's what we have mandated. Fortunately, though our total area of the exhibition is quite big, but the number of exhibitors are less. Our main problem was not the number of exhibitors. It is the multiple agency that they were working with, because a lot of them are using around 20 odd agencies for their stall maintenance and things like that. And there are a lot of agencies which are from abroad. So taking those data and monitoring them was a humongous task, but we had to go through it. And fortunately, there was no event that has done. And we really thank God that we could, do the exhibition without any problem. Thank you.
Okay, so the biggest takeaway from me in that sense was the government has supported. So I think that's
Yes, absolutely.
that's one of
Not
the
only supported,
better
they
things.
were so proactive in coming and giving us all the advisory and what to do, what not to do. We were actually not at all that sensitive during that point of time, I must admit. But with them, with their advisory, we have taken all the steps whatever was advised.
Yeah, I think hopefully that sort of support from the government would continue, and exhibitions would see that kind of support going forward from the government. I mean, that's what we can hope for. I would request Satyendra. I know that Satyendra, you had 4 shows going at the peak of the corona hit, and so obviously you've gone through some turbulent times. I mean, I would want you to share your experiences with regard to how dynamic it was and what were the steps you had taken.
Thank you, Sunil. Good morning to all the industry captains, colleagues, and friends. To start with, I will have a small phrase to narrate, which I was really touched, when I received this. It reads, in the end, everything is going to be okay. If it is not okay, it is not the end. The universe has our back and life supports us. Out of each experience comes growth, which reveals depth. We hear the lesson and we listen without fear. We know that everything is working for our highest good. We are stronger than ever. So coming to your point, Sunil, what you said, I'm not going to repeat what Debasish has said. I think there are certain parameters which most of us as an organizers faced, when the exhibition started in month of January till February. And I think we were fortunate enough. And at the same time, was a very difficult proposition to have 4 shows co-located at the same time at 2 different cities. Fortunately, I think we had a very strong SOPs in place, and most importantly was our teamwork. The communication, both internal and external, was very, very important. We had series of meetings, series of discussions which has happened, and very importantly, would like to thank the venues, our service providers, and definitely the local authorities, with whom we had daily meetings. It was time consuming, but we managed to do things which were required. For us, the most important aspect was health, safety, and security of all our attendees, whether it was a housekeeper or our VIPs coming to the show or our international delegations, because we had international people flying to our shows also, a part of which is already being captured by Debasish in his comments, what he shared. So very importantly, pre-show, what we did was communication. And we had communication going out to our customers, to our exhibitors, which were positive. The measures we were taking and we had taken on site to ensure their health and safety. So that covers their concern about oh, what will happen if I'm going to go on site. And at the same time, I think series of meetings with our service providers, with support from the venue. The setup time, which was very, very critical, COVID was just picking up. And for us, especially in Greater Noida in Delhi, the challenge was the riots erupted in East Delhi. So which definitely added on to our challenge. And I think, but most important thing was to be patient, have positive attitude. So I think the measures which we had taken, which were in line with the advisories which was issued by the local authorities and the health ministries and the health authorities, were sanitization, taking care, about health and safety of the works going inside the halls. like, that was very, very important. We ensured, I think, which all of us have done that, like, having hand sanitizers, like, being available, like a separate medical facility in case if somebody has any symptoms. So we had the, like, discussions with the local hospitals in case there is needs arise. So they had a medical team being stationed on site, and if needed be, we had made provisions to take them, like, to the nearby hospitals. So I think this were some of the parameters and activities what we did apart from the regular SOPs what we follow. And I would really like to thank the venue, like, the kind of support which they have given. True, we had challenges, but we managed to mitigate those challenges with the help of everybody on site. Like, it was all our service providers, like, and definitely our exhibitors also at the same time, and visitors who cooperated with us. They understood what the challenge is, and as a team, we made it. And fortunately, like, very, very proud to say, we had good numbers of visitor turnout, like, which we were quite apprehensive with, like, how it is going to be. So we had a successful 4 shows concluding on a very positive note.
Okay, thanks, Satyendra. I think one of the things that's coming out very clearly is that there should be a cross-functional communication and cross-functional cooperation that works across exhibitors, visitors. All the stakeholders need to come together. If they don't come together, I don't think and they need to understand the challenges that the organizers and all of us face. And unless that happens, it's not going to move forward. So I would now request Max Fernandes to give his 2 bits, because his events are on the border of hopefully when we come out of this crisis. So he is in the preparatory phase, and he's put together something, and he's been communicating with many of the venues also, I know, with certain things that he would like to do. So I would want him to, give his thoughts on that.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Am I audible, Sunil?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for having me here on this forum, and just to share my thoughts about, as you said, we have some shows lined up for the very near future, and it's too early to say whether we would be going ahead with it because it's scheduled for the month of July, start of July. So we have postponed some of our shows that were there earlier, month of March and April. So what I would like to point out over here is the shows that are upcoming. We actually don't have a very clear picture when and by the government authorities we would be allowed to conduct events per se. So our shows being, mostly dealing with social gatherings. So this is going to be very challenging. But having said that, we do have to have our plans in place. And for that, at Informa, we already have, a lot of our disaster management preparations, emergency evacuation plans in place. There are risk assessments that we do for all our shows. And going ahead also, we would be conducting them, yes. The main thing that we look at after is, when we take a decision for, rescheduling any show of ours, is have a constant dialogue with all our stakeholders, right from our internal stakeholders to our external stakeholders also, which is the exhibitors, the visitors. We take a buy-in from them, because there are n number of shows happening. So we definitely have to take their point of view while we plan on this. Then we also keep in dialogue with all our service providers, all our agencies that we work with. So we try to have their feedback. We try to assess the situation with them, because it's going to be difficult carrying ahead all shows getting rescheduled. There will be a lineup of shows waiting to be conducted, and you have scarcity of maybe service providers coming to your assistance. So that is very important to take into consideration. It's just not that, organizers can have the liberty of just choosing the date and going ahead. We need to even look up at the services. So that's very critical for the success of the show. You just can't go ahead and plan on a date and expect someone to come and give you a helping hand. No, it has to be pre-planned. So definitely we are in touch with all our service providers as to how should we go ahead in having the preparations done. Definitely they would be busy with multiple shows in hand. So it is critical to understand how is their manpower planning in place. even with all the laborers now moving to their villages and trying to come back later on, that would be a challenge in future. So definitely we are also trying to monitor those kind of aspects before taking calls. We are also looking at maybe if venue is a constraint, as we have it in Mumbai, we have just a single venue, one in the outskirts. So probably that's not a good choice for us at times. So we are also trying to explore into looking at maybe tier 2 cities. Probably if we could, move on to tier 2 cities in conducting our shows, if we don't have the bandwidth here at the regional level. So that's another options that we try to look at. We also are trying to look at if there is any possibility of co-locating one of our shows, the shows that we have already planned in future. And if we have to reschedule any shows, then we also look into the possibility whether we can co-locate the same show along with that show. So combining 2 shows at a time definitely helps us a lot by managing the costs, like trying to get some overlap of visitors, probably if there is some synergies between both these shows happening. So it definitely helps a lot into looking into those aspects also. And definitely the venues play a big role over here. Then we are fortunate that I've been in dialogue with many of you, the venue providers, and they have been very supportive to us in this matter, accommodating dates, trying to, speak with the other organizers also, whether we have some shows that have, profiles clashing. So that is another point of concern that we have always, and we are trying to look into those kind of things with the venues. We are also trying to speak with our service providers into relooking into the contracts that we already have at the Informa. We usually sign the contract at the start of the financial year for the entire year events. So probably it's time to relook at those kind of contracts also, because there could be some changes required into it from either sides. That is another thing that it is there in the plan. And finally, I would say that, this all decisions that we take on planning, it all goes in hand with what are the government directives that will be in place for the future. Right now, it's too early to say what can be the outcome of this. So definitely we are monitoring the advisories by the state authorities, the World Health Organization. So we have teams in place in our organization that look into all these aspects and convey the information further to us. That helps us into taking decisions at the local level. So these are the various points that we have in mind and which we try to take into consideration while planning for the future and the contingencies of any shows.
Thank you, Max. Thank you. And last but not the least, not the biggest stakeholder in many ways, is our service providers. I would request Mr. Vicky Bedi to give us his thoughts on both from a logistics service provider and from an IELA's perspective, and generally what service providers in the industry, what they're going through presently, and what are the challenges that they're going through, and on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that they are doing to look at this effectively.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks to IELA. Planning obviously is based on risk assessments and the kinds of scenarios that are likely to happen and the trigger points that come up. But when you mentioned that, planning and strategizing is very important, I think it is equally important to have those strategies and planning being implemented. And logistics industry has a very strong privilege that we are one industry where contingencies happen on a daily basis. My office across 7 verticals in 17 cities, handling 250 shipments a day. There is fire every day, and it's not today, but it goes on every day. So we are, in a very unique position that we handle contingencies on a daily basis, somewhere or the other, some city, someplace. Having said that, I can give you many, many examples which have happened over the last 15 days or 25 days, where our shipments, a tunnel boring machine, which was 25 feet wide, got stranded because of sudden imposition of the lockdown. We've had situations where trucks have been stranded on a pan-India basis. Then we've had a situation where pharmaceutical shipments were getting loaded onto an aircraft, and suddenly the government of India banned the export of those drugs, the medicines. And then so coordinating those issues, and then we've had special aircraft, Air Force planes coming in to pick up those medicines, requiring very, within 24 hours obtaining DGCA permissions, etc. So it's a very, very unique situation for a logistics service provider to continuously have these challenges, because there are so many multiple agencies that are involved in our work. Having said that, this COVID-19 obviously has put everything come to a standstill as far as exhibition logistics is concerned and exhibition service providers are concerned. And I think most of the people are currently focusing on more towards, planning now as to how they're going to get out of it. So after, it's first the survival instinct that is working on people at this point of time, trying to see what they can do immediately. And all those discussions have taken place over the past few days, in the context of addressing human resources, how they're going to plan the payments, the cash flows, etc., etc. And beyond that, I think then people are now, after having reconciled for about 2 weeks, sitting at home, discussing a lot of work, I think people are now looking at how this revival is going to happen, And obviously it is anybody's guess when this will start off. But the other day, Binu had mentioned that he doesn't see this happening. And even Anbu had mentioned that, probably the last quarter or the beginning of the next year would be a fairly good assessment. And keeping that in mind, I think revival strategies are going to be built up. Having said that, there are, for us in my company, on IELA, let me first give you the IELA background. IELA has gone ahead and taken positions on a global level where we are trying to connect with various stakeholders for getting the benefits for the logistics companies. So we were addressed, agencies in Italy trying to seek support for our logistics service providers. Similar initiatives are being done with different governments. Regrettably, that cannot happen in India because we are a part of a much larger industry. And, the logistics, exhibition logistics is not so large enough that the government would really look at it. But having said that, I am personally going to be taking initiatives with various stakeholders over here, including the ITPO, to try and address certain issues that are going to come up. And I'm, trying to build, there will be sort of, I would say, guidelines initiated by IAI, which would flow to these agencies, and then, hope for the best that can happen. Beyond that, I think my biggest, my personal biggest surprise that happened to me was this huge, on the background, I don't know whether you can see in my study, my wife having put a very big thing written as "Welcome Home," because after having spent last year with 139 overseas flights, I think that's the big surprise that I'm at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. I suppose some of the things that come out in this brief, this thing is that all of us need to do a certain amount of risk assessment, not certain amount, I would say real risk assessment, a deep dive as to what are the different challenges that you might have vis-a-vis the COVID scenario. And specifically, when you look at it from an operations perspective, specifically, one of the major challenges many people tend to forget is the challenges that the service providers always face. And Max brought it out quite well in terms of the migratory labor that tends to come to the major cities whenever we have a major show. And that is going to be that's going to take a hit because they are no longer where they're supposed to be, and them coming in together and helping out the exhibitions. So the ramp up strategy that we are looking at may not happen as quickly as we would want it to happen. I would like to talk about a few things that we did from our venue at the Bangalore International Exhibition Center. At the center, when we were having many of these events, we had separate paramedic team going around the exhibition halls, talking to exhibitors, trying to figure out if anybody's fallen sick or whatever it is. We had earmarked an isolation room so that in case there is any sort of people with certain symptoms, we would get them there and then evacuate them to the nearest hospital during, if this would have happened. We had hand sanitizers placed in all the common areas, in the restrooms. And recently what we have done once, when the lockdown or just before the lockdown, what we did was, whatever staff coming in, we have them having a cleaning or a sanitation protocol put in place. That people come in, they're checked, and they're asked to wash their hands. Everybody's supposed to wear gloves. I think these are the things that can be expected as we move into the future also. Now, the next part of this particular discussion is something which I would like to say is crystal ball glazing. Because we don't know what's going to happen in the future and what sort of contingencies we need. Nobody has a very clear understanding of how things are going to develop in the next few weeks as we speak. So our intention as a team is to figure out generically how things would pan out and what are the different risk mitigation strategies that you can put in place to figure out a way forward. So I have some questions coming in. I will address it as we move through this discussion. Some of it is pertinent to the next part of the discussion. So my first question here is to Debashish. So Debashish, what do you think are the challenges which you think are going to be coming in the near future, in the next few months or maybe in the next 6 months, which the event industry is going to go through, especially since you guys are very much, because you're from an association, you're very much on the ear as far as how the industry is evolving. And I would really like to hear your perspective on this.
Sunil, what I believe is it will be the availability of space, because in India, the India exhibition season is for about 6 to 7 months in real terms. So all the exhibition which will be deferred to or going to happen, I think there will be an overlap of dates for each and everybody, and it's a healthy situation for exhibition venues like you, but it will be a very unhealthy situation for us, those who will be trying to do some exhibition. And here I must say that with the contingency plans that we need to do, other than taking care of the safety measures for all the partners or service providers, service partners, the venue owners will have to come forward in a much much more proactive way. Like we couldn't have done our exhibition without the help and support of IEML. It's a big help and support by them during the COVID situation, cropping up, and they have done a very good job helping us in all aspects, along with coordinating with the authorities. I think it will be the same thing with your end as well. You must have done the same thing to all of your exhibitors. But my worry would be mainly the overlapping of dates, and so along with that, there will be the overlapping of service provider, because suppose at the same time there are 5 exhibitions happening in different parts of the country, and all are big exhibition, you will have less service providers support than you are supposed to get. Fortunately for me, I'll be watching and learning from all other, because my exhibition is again in 2022. So I'll take clues from Satyendra, from Max, and all other associations, and hopefully I can find out very good clues to go ahead with how to handle the situation. But the one thing we must say, that we'll have to take healthcare into the system in a very big way. Otherwise, there will be, and then again, we'll have to take care of the government directives as and when it comes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Debashish. Now, I think I'm giving a very difficult assignment to Satyendra. And one of the things that a lot of people would be wanting to hear about, exhibition setup dismantling. and social distancing. How do you put them on the same page? Satyendra, over to you.
Sunil, I think we cannot put them on the same page. We can put them on the common platform with a common understanding. I think I'll put it that way around. It's not going to be easy, but at the same time, it's possible. And this is possible with, as I really said, with teamwork. So everybody has to fulfill their roles and responsibility very honestly, truthfully, and practically. We have certain SOPs and guidelines in place already. But the thing is, it's not been reinforced. Like, some of the people for some reasons are not ready to follow. Now, coming to the point, about social distancing, see, we need to wait and watch like what the government mandate would come for. We already have certain mandate right now, but going ahead, I think all of us are waiting, what exactly the guidelines, restrictions, or do's and don'ts, that will be implemented or maybe issued by the authorities as of now. So depending upon that, we will have to plan our things accordingly. All of us have our SOPs in place, which we have been following, taking into consideration the challenges what we have encountered previously. So I'm just giving a small example. Say for example, in case of fire, what needs to be done, what precautions needs to be taken in case if something happens on site, what things needs to be done. Same thing is especially in Mumbai, in rains, if flood happens, what is the thing? If there is a terrorist attack, what is the SOP that needs to be followed? Now, COVID is again something unique which has come. Now, fortunately, we already have the experience, okay, what it is. But as of now, going ahead, we really don't know how it is going to take shape. We still don't have a cure. I'm sure the cure would come. When it comes, what points needs to be taken into account in terms of organizing an exhibition, specifically, with so many people coming from various cities within the cities and outside India coming in. So there are lots of parameters that needs to be taken care of. I think the most important aspect and most important critical point would be health, safety, and security of all the people associated with the event. I think that's very, very important. I think all our planning needs to be focused on that particular aspect, because if people feel safe and secure, then only they would travel to the show. And definitely then other things would follow, in terms of networkings and things like that. So going ahead, if things open up, which we all are anticipating, and I'm sure it would be, things are not going to be the same as it was. It is going to change. To start with, definitely exhibitions will be affected in terms of exhibitor numbers and visitor numbers to start with, but slowly and gradually would pick up, and I think it's going to kind of pick up and would come back to normal. But for that, specifically during the setup time, most importantly, venue is going to play a very, very important role. I think venue will have to take 2 steps ahead, I would say that. And thanks to IML, Sudeep and team, they have started, and even BIC for that matter. But the matter doesn't stop. I think venues across India needs to take similar steps, and which needs to be uniform. It cannot happen that some of the venues have some certain standards and other venues they don't, and they're not following that. So the entire exercise would fail. I would put that way around. And with whatever mandate or I would say rules and regulations, the authorities are going to come. I think venue is going to play an important role there, because I think very, very importantly, the investment that needs to be done by venue would be quite considerable. So that's there. On the similar lines, I think our service providers both are officially appointed and appointed by the exhibitors. I think we need to have regular meetings with them, kind of training sessions, knowledge sessions, trying and tell them, what needs to be done at their end, which is in line with whatever mandate that will be laid down by the authorities. So so that's very, very important. Certain things what came to our mind, when we have the SOPs we already have, but I think going ahead, we will have to restrict the kind of work which happen on site, in the exhibition hall. I think we need to have optimum utilization of resources, that's important. Just to give an example, you go anywhere else in the world, you will find an 100 square meter of booth being constructed by 4 to 5 people at the most, not more than that. But back in India, the same 100 square meter booth, you will find minimum 30 to 35 people doing it. So you can see the ratio. So I think we need to, like, the service providers need to think in terms of their strategy, like in terms of deploying smart resources. I would say training is going to be very, very important, like, of the labor who's going to be working on site. The discipline is going to be very, very important, and more important, the time. And definitely taking into consideration if the social distancing still remains, I think the challenge would be how, like, we try and contain that, like in terms of it does not harm, like, other people there inside. So, like, so definitely no cutting, like, no sawing, no painting. It has to be modular and prefabricated system construction on site. Only shell scheme booths, like, this is another way to look at it, like, where you kind of eliminate lots of construction works happening on site. And maybe, like, we have to revisit our construction guidelines and saying right now, I think each of the organizers have different parameters in terms of a minimum square meter of booth are entitled for shell scheme, and beyond that can be raw space. I think we all need to kind of be uniform in our approach. Okay, no, say minimum, it can be say 56 square meters. I'm just giving an example, but then all the organizers needs to follow. It cannot happen that one organizer is following, like, that norm and another not. So, like, the things would fail. Now, these are certain things to start with. I think, that's where the revival would happen, because, like, once the kickstart is good, as I said, like, definitely going ahead, the future is bright. I think people generally, like, the mindset is, oh, like, there will be increase in cost. I don't think so. I think if we plan properly, and in case if it is strategized properly, in fact, the cost can be reduced. You have to work smartly. Like, fine, like, there is a perception like India, the labor is cheap and it's labor intensive. So let's put, like, that many laborers. So I think we need to relook at, like, working at night kind of activity, because honestly, like, it does not yield much productivity. Like, if you have to actually calculate in terms of the kind of cost associated with it. So there are various parameters we need to evaluate. Now, one thing which I'm really happy to kind of share on this platform, some years back, like, and most of us in this, like, webinar would know about it and support me. IELA has come up with a white paper called Standards and Codes, like, which captures all these things, and which was kind of, like, being shared with industry at large. But I think somewhere, like, it got lost out. So I had a discussion with stakeholders at IELA, and very happy to share that we are going to, there is going to be a task force which is going to be placed, which is going to relook at this document, revive it back, and circulate to everybody in the industry, so that, like, the health and safety concerns and how, like, the exhibitions can, like, be organized systematically, like, fruitfully, and most importantly, successfully. Like, this would become like a basic paper. Definitely, we need to coordinate and discuss with the statutory authorities, take their inputs into account and include this as a part of the document. I think very, very importantly, apart from whatever the local statutory authority says, but for industry at large, like what we as an organizers do, I think venue and other service providers, like, I think I will say at across, right from starting from an housekeeper to a security guard, to a catering company, to a stand construction company, everybody. Now, everybody needs to consider as a part of a family, like, they are equally involved. Their support and cooperation is required to revive our industry and to take this to the next level. Like, I think whatever challenges we are facing, all of us put together, we would be able to overcome that, and definitely, like, the bright days ahead. So that is what my perspective would be.
Okay, Satyendra, thank you. We'll come back to you later. So Max, you're obviously, what I want you to talk about is, we've been talking about, you said about the theme protection part of it, and invariably, and some of it was highlighted by Debasish also saying that once you start clubbing all the shows to one side of the Q4 or Q3 and Q4, which is obviously what we are going to be looking at. Invariably, what the biggest impact that's going to happen is with exhibitors and visitors. And obviously, they are your end customers in many ways. And how would this sort of evolving scenario in the exhibition planning impact them, and how would you engage them? I mean, in terms of operational, I'm not talking about the sales part. Sales has been done, they're coming on to site, and as an head of operations, how do you make them feel that, okay, this is really adding value?
Well, yes, Sunil, as you said, once the sales is done, we are on site, the show is going on, we have moved on to the show days, and to build the confidence of all the stakeholders, right from our service providers to the visitors coming to the venue and also the participants. Definitely, there's a lot of communication, as you said before, that needs to be going on. We have a lot of mailers and do's and don'ts being sent to everyone pre-show. So definitely websites and all, we will have to disseminate the information over there, saying that these are the precautionary measures that are being undertaken by the organizers in conjunction with the venue holders. So definitely there are some kind of precautionary measures being taken that could be spelled out to gain the confidence of the visitors that come to site. And we can also look into having more of pre-registration now. That's going to be the key to, getting a successful show going ahead. The paper, eliminating of all the paper filling forms, the contact points, the less number of contact points that we have on site, definitely that is going to help us a lot. So we would look into more of having pre-registration in full swing. People could come, maybe they would get badges provided to them by emails, which they could display and on site, and maybe gain access to the venue. So that is going to be very, very crucial in the coming days for the shows. Health safety is definitely, as my co-panelists mentioned, health and safety is going to take a very priority into all our shows now. And keeping that in mind, this is the type of seamless kind of entries that we would like to see going ahead. We would also maybe try to have a look at, having staggered timings for visiting the shows. Probably if we have pre-registrations, and we could have maybe look into having batches of visitors if the government directives come that, there's a certain cap on number of people gathering at a particular moment. So probably that the next point we would like to, maybe go in for is maybe having staggered timings for multiple visitors. We could have predefined batches like you have in the other seminars and conferences, and also we could have a limitation on people coming in. This would also mean maybe incurring more of cost, because your show timings probably would have to be increased. You would have to start early, you would have to end up later at night, just to accommodate, batch-wise visitors visiting the stalls, and in not having inconvenience of them coming and, trying to hang around the venue just to wait for their turn to get in. This is the type of staggered entries that we could look at. We can also look at, maybe messaging to the visitors beforehand, like come with your particular queries in mind, not just coming and browsing through. The exhibitors could be encouraged to have their products displayed more on site beforehand, online. So once you have your products online, then the visitors could pre-show, a couple of days pre-show, probably look at them. This is a specific product on display. Okay, they could come prepared with their questionnaire and directly go and meet the concerned exhibitor on site. And that way it would, make that more point-to-point meetings that could be conducted, rather than, going through around on the entire venue and going through the halls, trying to get other information also. So probably these are the kind of measures that we would try to see being implemented in future. And for you, I'm sure we all know there are many of the exhibitors staff that come on site, visitor staff that come on site, to collate information. So gather information, brochures and things like that. We will have to seriously look into reducing those kind of visitors coming into the venue, and probably have some kind of a huge display outside the entrance, wherein maybe the information what they are seeking for, like details of companies participating, contact person, obviously in consensus with the exhibitors. This all information could be displayed out so that we reduce this many number of people coming into the venue who are not serious buyers. That would help out a lot. As I said earlier, we can have predetermined timings of meetings, like have a calendar floated online so that people definitely book their meeting slots, and we create more of meeting rooms probably on site. I was just going through the messages that are coming up on the chat, and one interesting point someone mentioned was how venues will be supporting the organizers in, if we have to go ahead and create a wider aisles, more of meeting areas, and also because
I was about to ask that.
yeah, I was just keeping an eye open onto the points out also. So definitely this is something which is really worthwhile looking into, because the more of space that we occupy on site, the rentals go up. So as I said before, we are in dialogues with venues, and we have got considerate venues like VIC and IML who are always supportive to us in all such steps that we take. And thanks to you guys, I think moving ahead also definitely we can address challenges step by step. It is only that we need to put our thinking caps on and try to see how we go into creating a better, safer environment on site for all our stakeholders, internal as well as external. So these are my few points that I would like to place out.
Thank you, Max. Thanks a lot. A lot of as I can look at the chat window, a lot of people are come with leading questions on top of whatever you have said. I don't know how much we'd be able to address. We'll park it for the time being. Vicky, your thoughts on exhibition service providers, and a lot of it, like what Max has said now and earlier, and what Satyendra had mentioned, and obviously I have said from a venue perspective, we feel that some things which organizers many times tend to just not addressed appropriately are the service provider challenges. And Debasish also brought out, you can pick any date. Any date is good, but that doesn't mean your service providers will be able to support you. And going forward, service providers themselves are going to see this. We'll have multiple events happening across the country because of the clubbing, or the differing of the events happening. So from your perspective, how do you think service providers are going to react to this, or how they're going to proactively address all these concerns?
So, in the context of, let me address this, into 5 categories. One is in the context that I'd like to tell you over the last 20-25 days that we've had our experience with the government. I think the government agencies have come up very proactively and are taking very positive decisions, real-time decisions which are impacting. So if that can become a real possibility for the future also, and that becomes the culture of the government, then a lot of streamlining will happen regarding the logistics movements intra and within the country. So looking at that as a positive factor. The other aspects that have been brought out over the past few days have been relating to standards. There will be a demand for higher standards. There will be a demand for defined non-negotiable standards, and compliances will become necessary. And I believe the logistics and these other service providers will have to sort of inherently build in their capabilities because they wouldn't be any compromise. The only challenge that I see is as to whether the the organizers themselves tend to compromise on maintaining those standards. Right now we are all very gung-ho about it, that we need to do this, we need to do this. But historically, it's very easy to flow back into the same situation once the challenge is over, thinking that, well, it's not going to happen again. So I think that part of the responsibility of making sure that the standards that are laid down are complied with will lie both on the organizers as well as the venues for monitoring. Of course, it will be the responsibility of the service providers to build in that within their own systems and the manpower. Coming to manpower, all I hear is that there will be a curtailment of manpower on site, which is very good, But looking at that in the context, I remember Sudip mentioning that they would probably be looking at self-declarations in the context of the people who are deployed so the responsibility of monitoring the labor and the contracted labor to a certain extent would flow on the service providers, and I think that will need to be built in. We'll need to obviously rework in our own processes, like Satyendra mentioned just now that, instead of having 30 or 40 people at a booth, why can't it be done within 5 or 6 or 7 people? So I believe automation will come into play, prefabricated stalls would come into play. But again, at the end of the day, health and safety becomes the most critical factor of all of us as of right now. And security became an issue post 9/11. Health and safety will become a challenge at this point of time, and increased health and safety measures will need to be adopted. And obviously these need to be complied with. So service providers in the context of adaptability don't have a choice. If I have to do my work, and if that needs to be done in a smaller, precise time, I believe the service providers, there'll be very few service providers who are going to come back and say, no, I'm not going to do it because it's not possible. I think they'll all manage to fit it in, Now, when you say that in the context of, a lot of shows getting rolled over and getting connected into a smaller period of time, I think post, this survival, in the revival mode, everybody want to get as much business as they can. And obviously, they want to make sure that it is successful, because that is going to be the primary factor for the industry. It is the revival and the survival and the success of that show that is critically important. And that brings me to the last point, which is collaboration. Collaboration is not meant to be, it's not something that we speak on these, webinars and go gung-ho about it, that collaboration is not the talk of. I think people will need to walk the talk in this, we know that we are this industry is an entrepreneur-driven industry where people tend to be obviously looking inwards rather than outwards. And I think what you mentioned just now, the cross-functional collaboration would become very important. And I think that becomes, the wisdom will have to be there. And I think, I believe, each one of us in this industry is a successful person. And success also brings in a lot of wisdom. And I think I'm very hopeful about it, that this collaboration, even though it's being tom-tommed very greatly, while, one end of the spectrum is that things may fall back, but I can only be positive about it and hope that people will collaborate and work together. And once that happens, cross-functional, I also see collaborations between service providers amongst themselves. And if that can happen, I think that'll be a great success or a great learning out of this calamity.
Thank you, Vicky. So I think you have very close to running out of time, Nidhi, if I'm correct in my assumption. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll try to answer some of the questions that came out. Very pertinent, I don't know whether pertinent question, but a question came up, which would be the first event that would happen post-COVID? Whoever asked that question, I don't think none of our panelists would be in a position to give you that answer. I think we're all trying to figure out what's happening next. What's happening tomorrow. So I don't think we would have an answer for that. But broadly speaking, whatever we have discussed today and whatever points that came out in the chat window also, what I feel is cooperation across verticals and stakeholders is one of the things that is a definite takeaway as far as we are concerned. We feel that whether it's the service provider, whether it's the venue, the exhibitors, organizers, they need to be on board, they need to have the information, they need to be given awareness that this is going to be the new norm. There's no running away from that. When we talk of new norms, there are definitely two new norms which are going to be there, which is, one is the work ethics, and we've been talking about it across the board, whether it is, we're talking about the setup dismantling time, any of our service providers, there is going to be a new norm in terms of the way the work has going to be executed. And I saw in the chat that somebody had said, and this we discussed, that setup and dismantling time during the setup time, basically, most of the work should be done off-site, and only the last mile setup should happen on site, so that it reduces your setup time. And as a venue, I don't like that. But then from a social distancing perspective, obviously that could be the new norm that we are looking at. Then safety norms. Somebody had put up saying that because of the new safety norms, are costs going to go up? My personal belief, and I think a lot of I think Satyendra or Max had brought it out. When so many people are asking for good safety and hygiene standards, when that becomes the new norm, invariably when a lot of people ask for it, the cost will come down. Today, only few organizers and few people are asking for it. Therefore, it becomes a premium experience. It is no longer the premium experience. It becomes the new norm it is the experience, period. So then I think that would invariably bring the cost down, and a standard will come across the industry where health and safety would be of the highest order. And that's what I would like to say. And that's something that I and Satyendra have been talking about for quite some time. Somebody had told about how the exhibition stalls on the floor would change, that the aisle spaces would become bigger, the venues would be happier or sadder, which we have to see how it moves forward. But then definitely whether you only allow shell schemes, whether you only do a certain square meter of stall, how that's going to pan out, that's difficult to say at this point of time. Satyendra had brought out that 56 square meters or maybe 36 square meters or some minimum square meters. Below that we don't allow, and we only do shell scheme. These are different thoughts, but like we said when we started off this session, this is crystal ball gazing, and we are not very sure how this is going to pan out. But then these are different options that as a panelist, we've been discussing with each other for the last couple of weeks. We thought maybe these are things that can sow the seed of thoughts in your head, and maybe you can think on those lines. Definitely training and awareness across service providers, and everybody should be online. Nobody can take it casually. And I think this is across the country. We have to, as organizers and as venues and respectable service providers, we have to drill it down to the last man on the ground that this is required to be done, and there is no way out of it. Else somebody else from outside our industry is going to come and knock it on our head. Rather being it organic thing and it becomes an organic thing, or it becomes an inorganic thing. Inorganic things are always a painful thing. Organic things are a growth perspective. Yes, Satyendra already brought out the fact that I and Satyendra actually worked on an ethics and code standard a few years back. It's good news that that's been brought back, and invariably the health and safety aspects would be brought into it and promulgated across the industry. And hopefully IELA would be the torchbearer in taking it across the industry and making it a standard that all of us can aspire to be coming together. One of the other things which I think has been slightly brought in, but not completely brought in, I think as we move forward, technology is going to play a major role. When we talk about technology, when I'm talking about the online registrations, online engagements, I think there's going to be a sea change in that. And minimum engagement is going to happen on site. So nowadays, I know all of us are struggling, and we are also an organizer of an event. So I know the number of online registrations are very small compared to the percentage, the total numbers. But I think that's going to change. People wouldn't want to come in, because as a social distancing, guy, I wouldn't want to go and stand in the queue, and I would rather get my thing done online, and come with the badge and then just walk in. I don't want to stand in a queue which too many people, with the rush or something like that. And I think that's going to push the online registrations, and hopefully we would reach a state where across the globe we are talking about 100% online registrations, or even 80% online registrations. Hopefully we would reach that standard. I think these are the new takeaways. One of the other things that invariably is going to be a challenge is bunching of shows in Q3 and Q4. That is, I'm talking about September onwards, because a lot of shows which have been shifted. That's going to be a major challenge. Venues are happy, no doubt about it. But the point is, it's going to be a major challenge for the venues, major challenge for the organizers. How do we manage to do what the government norms want us to do, but still keep the business up and running? So there is a dichotomy, but then invariably, if there are no challenges, all of us need not be there. We will not get our salaries if otherwise. I don't think we'll be in business otherwise. these are questions, and I don't think me and my panelists are able to find good answers, but I think we are here to, like I said, make you guys think on some of those pertinent questions which you may or may not have thought about. So that's been our endeavor. And I think that finishes our time. I hope I've been able to address many of the concerns. If there are more concerns which do come in, you can always send it to Nidhi, and Nidhi can send it to us, and we can give you suitable answers offline. I think that's it, Nidhi, from our end. Over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you so much. That's been a very insightful session. I think like both the sessions today were very, very insightful, and people had good takeaways. Thank you very much for adding value to the IEIA webinar series. And I just would like to request anybody who wants to speak or give any feedback, share any feedback with us, may kindly prompt in the chat window. Or if you want to address the panelists here. I think that's all. So have a great day, everyone. And thank you very much.